Hi everybody, a big warm welcome to this workshop all about how to write about grief and loss, either as just a form of self-care for you or as something that you can share with friends, family and the wider world as well. My name's Bridget. I'm a writer and a podcast maker based in the northeast of England in Newcastle, and I'm part of the wonderful Let's Talk About Loss Newcastle group, run by Amy and Nick. So if there's any Newcastle members listening, hi, I'm missing you all. I'm hoping to see you very, very soon. I think we're all feeling really, really helpless at the moment because of the coronavirus pandemic. There's lots of people in our lives that either we support them or they give support to us through our grief that we aren't able to see at the moment. So when Beth put a call out to see what people would like as resources on the Let's Talk About Loss pages, or if there was anything that they could contribute, I felt like it was really important to use my skills as a writer to kind of get some stuff out there that maybe will benefit you guys. So that's what we're going to do today. If there's anything that you really, really enjoy and would like to see more of, let me know. Just let me know on social media. There's all of those details at the end of the presentation. So I guess the most important place to start would be me and my journey and my grief. So I've always written stories and poems, been featured in some magazines. I do filmmaking and media and podcasting, but I've never written anything kind of book length or novel length until my dad passed away in 2018. It was quite sudden. I'd always joked with him that I'd love to write his life story. I thought he was one of the most interesting men I'd ever met. He was an actor. He'd lived in Paris for 8 years. He was in a Barnardo's home as a child. Just some really, really interesting things that you always say, oh, I'd love to write your life story, but time passes and you never do. And when he died, it was a really, really interesting and really kind of valuable way of making sense of everything that had happened to him, not just in his life but in his death as well. So I kind of got to it, all kind of 80,000 words of it, and I'm currently in the editing stage at the moment where I'm hoping that it will find itself an agent and a publisher, but we'll see. So I now work kind of full time as a writer and a podcaster. I spend 3 days in a school in the northeast called Excelsior Academy, where we run a project that teaches creative writing lessons for years 7, 8 and 9, and then extracurricular lessons, lunchtime clubs, after school clubs, summer schools and things for all year groups. And that's really, really rewarding and beneficial. And I love it. I love helping other people edit their work. I work with cultural venues as a writer. So it's become what was quite a kind of small or medium-sized part of my life to a really big, important part of my life since my dad passed away. And I guess I would have loved him to know how big that got, but I think he would be really proud of me writing his life story, and hopefully in the future having lots and lots of people read that. So because of what I've been through, and also because of teaching lots of people in schools and workshops, I really do believe in the power of writing, especially when you're going through something, when you're grieving, when you've lost, or any other kind of trauma or really big life-changing event. It doesn't have to be horrible. It could be a really big happy event like getting married or having a baby, and writing could really help you make sense of that. So the things that we're going to cover in this workshop are kind of 3 very simple sections. The first is a little more detail about the benefits of writing and what it can't do. The second is what you could write about. So I've got some prompts for you. I've got some recommendations of where to start with writing about grief and loss. And then the third section is how you could write it. So different forms like spoken word, like poetry, short stories, flash fiction, novels, memoirs, all of that kind of stuff. And the last part is when I'll give you lots of tips and tricks and resources for you to springboard away from this workshop and find other things that could benefit you as you carry on your writing journey, which is obviously what I hope you would do. And we should say as well that it's absolutely fine to kind of turn this video off or pause it in places that matter to you. Writing about grief doesn't have to be really horrible and depressing, but it will obviously bring up kind of difficult emotions for people. So it's okay to not do this workshop until you're ready, or skim over the bits that you don't think will help you at the moment. Like, this resource will hopefully always be there for you. So yeah, don't push yourselves, and make sure you take the time that kind of your writing and your grief deserves. So there have been some studies and some research that's proved writing to be really beneficial in situations such as grief, trauma, depression, PTSD, and other situations that might affect our well-being. So when there are all sorts of thoughts scrabbling around in your head, writing them down can help you make order and sense out of them. It can help you work out if there's anything you can actually do to make you feel better. Sometimes the act of just writing them down, that act itself will make you feel better. And it can, for us who have lost people, it can reduce the worry that we might forget things about that person, which is something I'm sure all of us worry about as time goes on from when we've lost them. It can also, if you decide to share your work with other people, it can help them understand what it's like to go through what you've been through. And that's not just true about you maybe showing that to friends or family members who haven't experienced loss in the same way that you have, or people that you consider to maybe have never experienced loss at all, and you really want to show them what it's been like living in your head or walking in your shoes. But also for other people who have lost, it's really, really nice to be able to say, I read that book or I read that poem, and it articulated exactly how I feel about grief, and it really resonated with me and made me feel better to hear that. So it can have loads and loads of great benefits. What it isn't is an alternative to therapy, medication, CBT, talking to your friends and family. Even though your therapist or your counsellor might invite you to do writing as part of your sessions, kind of going it alone, like this workshop, is not the same as seeking professional help, although it can be really, really useful. And writing doesn't have to be something you do every day. You don't have to say, yeah, I'm going to write a novel and that's what I'm going to do while I'm grieving. You might write a card or a tiny poem every Christmas or on an anniversary, and you might still find that really, really helpful for you. So whilst this is an invitation for you to get writing, it's definitely not an invitation for you to, write an entire kind of War and Peace style book if you don't want to. But if you are interested in turning this into a habit, even a daily habit, or making it part of your routine, then you need an environment that's kind of conducive to you feeling comfortable, having good writing ideas, and then actually being able to write them down. This doesn't have to be like a Virginia Woolf, style space that's completely kitted out in, wall-to-wall books and a big wooden writing desk and an open fire and all of that stuff that you see in like films. It just needs to be a place where you won't be disturbed, where you've got an amount of time that feels reasonable for you. So don't say, oh yeah, I'm going to do some writing about grief, but I've got to go and pick the kids up from school in half an hour, so I've got to do it really, really quickly. And some physical things that can inspire you if you need them. So you could bring into your space photos, you could bring in letters or cards or text messages, and they don't necessarily have to be from the person that you've lost. It could be that somebody WhatsApped you a really beautiful image with a quote on it, and you want to print that out and hold that while you're thinking about your writing. It could be anything. It could be a postcard from a holiday that you went on with the person that you lost, or just some really nice, photos, memories, and other things. If you don't have them, or you feel like you don't need them to write, it's there in your head and you're ready to go, then that's obviously fine. It's more that if you're really in a good writing place and you're in the moment and in the flow, you don't want to then have to like get up, go and find, that text message or that letter or anything. So if there are things that you think are going to be useful, then definitely get them ready. You also need to think about your mental headspace. So I touched on this really briefly. If you've You know, if you've got something you're going to do in half an hour's time, you may find it far too rushed, or you can't get yourself really into, you know, the headspace to do it. You could also be having a particularly, you know, bad day for other reasons. You could be grieving particularly hard, or feeling that that person's lost particularly hard that day. And for some people that might make writing all the more useful, and for other people you might be too close to it and just say, look, I can't write anything today. Either of those is absolutely fine, so don't push it. And some warm-up exercises, it's just like doing actual exercise. You can't just jump in as soon as you get sat down. Even just some little bits that might get you going. And you can find that in books, you can find that on the internet. There are loads and loads of places you could go for little exercises. I wanted to just show you one of the kinds of books that you can pick up, all about writing prompts. This is called 642 Things to Write About. It's absolutely jam-packed with things. You can literally just fall open on a page and you have to write about things like something you never told your mother, or a piece of clothing that you keep just for the memory. There's lovely, lovely things in here. Not all of them will be relevant to you, but sometimes it's nice to just have like a starting point that you can jump off from. It gets your brain whirring, it gets the ideas flowing. Literally just like you would in the gym, or, you know, doing anything, warming up and kind of getting your brain in gear is really, really important. So there's that kind of book. I'm scanning my bookshelf in case there's anything else, but I think there's, you know, you could type in writing prompts or writing helpers onto Amazon and there would be loads and loads, and we've got some great resources online as well that I will show you at the end of this presentation on a slide. So there's lots and lots. Make sure that you kind of like warm up your brain, get ready for writing. So now let's think about some prompts that you might actually want to start with to write about. So I've come up with 11 here. Feel free to pause this video on this slide and have a really good look at them. In fact, I'm going to stop talking for 5 seconds now so that you can pause this video, give them a good read, maybe even jot down some notes if there's one that particularly strikes you. So I'm going to stop. So what is the dictionary definition of grief? Do you feel this is a fair summary? Is it too formal? Is it too prescriptive? What does it make you feel, or does it feel at all relevant to what you've been through? Write a paragraph of text or a verse of poetry about each of the 5 stages of grief. Whether you think the 5 stages are like a thing or not, just looking them up and what you're supposed to feel during each of those stages might be enough for you to get going with some writing. Describe a favourite picture you have of the person you lost. What is happening out of shot of the photograph? So that could be a picture of you and them. It could be just them. It could be one of them as a child. It could be one of them, you know, right at the end of their life. Write yourself a condolences card you wish you had received. I think this one is quite like poignant, quite relevant at the moment, obviously with Let's Talk About Loss having their really good range of bereavement and condolence cards. We often feel like a lot of people come up short when they're trying to wish us all the best when we lose someone, and we now, or at least I feel like I know now, that I would write a much better condolences card now that I've been through it myself. But you may have received a really great one and you actually want to write a thank you card to that person, you know, retrospectively. You could do that as well. Write a letter to the person you've lost, updating them on your work, studies, hobbies, or even the football. This happens to me all the time. I always find things, like really mundane things, that I wish I could tell Dad about. You know, when Crystal Palace win a match against somebody they probably weren't going to win against. You know, when something happens on the news, I really want to know what he would think about Brexit or coronavirus or whatever. Write a recipe for grief as if it were a meal, or write directions for grief as if it were a journey. So what steps would you take? How many turnings would you make? Is it one long winding road? Is it a mountain climb? And with a recipe, is it 1 part red wine and 3 parts chocolate coated pretzels, which is what I felt like my grief was, but everybody's different, and that might be a really nice way of making sense of it. So write the blurb of the book that would be written about your loved one's life. So this obviously is coming from my own experience, and you don't have to have any intention of actually writing the book, but it might be a really nice way of you figuring out what the highlights of that person's life were. What did they do or say or believe that you think other people would find really valuable to know about? Write a letter to the person you were before this loss, or the person you were as soon as the loss happened. So yeah, you could think about what you'd like to tell yourself, what you'd like to tell other people, whether you feel like you've changed a lot or whether you feel like you haven't changed that much. That could be a good one to start with. Make a list of things you'd like to ask the person you've lost. Those could be really big things. They could be tiny things like, where did you put your Christmas stuffing recipe? Which is something I'd like to know. And then finally, write down the words you need to hear. So that could be a really interesting one. Just kind of thinking about, what advice do you need right now? You might not want to use any of these prompts. They might not kind of like sing to you. They might just be something to get you started. Or one of them might give you a really good idea that snowballs into something completely different. All of those things are totally fine. What you do with them is completely up to you. They're kind of yours now. And if words don't seem to come to you straight away, especially if you've never really done any writing like this before, you could try a couple of sentences and finish them off. So they could begin with something like, I miss them because ... You finish the sentence. Could be, what I remember most is, again, finish the sentence, or my favourite memory is ... Or you could even just jot down a really boring kind of secretary's report style piece about kind of when you experienced this loss, what you did next, where you lived, what happened, and go from there. The things that you write down might kind of jog your memory about other memories. Oh, I remember what happened then, and I remember the first person that came to visit me, or my friend that was particularly kind. So yeah, just using them as a place to begin and see what comes out of it. So you've had your spark of inspiration, even though I don't I don't always think it feels like a spark. It kind of feels like a weird trickle or a vague thud of inspiration. But you might want to start thinking about how you intend to write your piece of writing. You might already know this. You might be like, yeah, I definitely want to do bullet journaling or short stories, or I want to write a song or poetry or whatever. The important thing is to not feel bogged down by this list. You don't have to decide whether you're writing an ode or a sonnet or a biography or a rap or whatever. But this list is kind of to show you how much choice you have over what you do. And I wouldn't shy away from writing fiction. You're in a really, really good place. You're kind of in a really good place to be authentic about what grief really feels like. So if you don't want to write an entire book about grief, but you might write a children's book, and in it one of the characters experiences grief, you're kind of the best authority on what happens, how it feels, and what that person might go through. And also don't shy away from going in the complete opposite direction and really turn to kind of non-fiction. You might want to interview other people. You might want to write, your own kind of self-help book, or do a journal, or, anything like that. And you don't just have to use written prompts. You could use audio prompts. You could use visual prompts. You could look up, images of places that you went on holiday with your person that you lost. You could listen to ambient sounds. So ambient sounds are kind of sounds that you'd find in the world. So you could Google, audio clip of a forest. You could sit and listen to that for 10-15 minutes and then go away and write as if that's kind of inspired you. Whatever works for you. Google is your friend. You could Google so much stuff. You could Google fairy tales about, the town that your loved one came from, You could find out what stand-up comedy has already been written. You could read some self-help books. Pinterest is fantastic for things like journaling, diary entries, all of that kind of stuff. So there's really, really like lots of resources at your disposal. So don't feel scared by this list. Kind of do what feels right first, and then see what happens. So in this workshop, I focus mainly on kind of fiction writing, but I know that blogging and vlogging can be really important and really soothing to some people as well that are grieving. So I called on my lovely friend Hannah, who runs a blog called Hannah's Happy Hour, and they asked her kind of what her thoughts were on writing about grief and how it's benefited her, what she sees in it, what, the trials and tribulations of doing it. And this is what she said. So she said, the grieving process is never straightforward, and it's something that everyone experiences in their own way. For me, writing became a way of both releasing my emotions and distracting my mind. At first, I used to write letters to my mum, who I sadly lost to breast cancer in 2017, which made me feel a little closer to her. Through journaling my thoughts and feelings, I stumbled on the world of blogging, and I've never looked back since. My blog is a place that brings me comfort. It allows me to have open and honest conversations about my grief experience, which others, I hope, can relate to. More than anything, it is a little corner of the internet where I do my best to mirror my mum's positive attitude and spread a little joy. Her motto was make a memory, and she was all about living life to the full. I use my blog to document all the adventures and happy moments I have that I'd really love to be able to tell her about. So Hannah's a really, really fantastic example, as well as just being one of the nicest people ever, of using blogging to kind of work with your grief, talk about it openly, and that's the kind of best example of writing which benefits you, and then showing that writing to other people and it hopefully benefiting them as well. So you can visit her blog at hannahshappyhour.com, and her Instagram as well at Hans Happy Hour. And Instagram and Facebook and Twitter are things that you might not necessarily think are, places to write in themselves. They might be places that you could share writing that you've done on a blog or, in a booklet or whatever. But some people just use things like Instagram, and that's equally beneficial. That's absolutely fine. There's no kind of snobbery about this. You don't have to, want to be in Waterstones. You don't have to want to, become the next J.K. Rowling. You can just really honour that person, and if it benefits you, it really doesn't matter where you put your writing or what form your writing is in. It's all about your decisions and kind of what you want to do. So what now? You've absolutely bossed it up until this point. You've found some prompts that interest you. You've warmed up. You've been writing, whether that's a blog or a poem or a song or anything. What do you do with it after it's got to a point where it may not be finished, but it's, around there? So reading over and editing your work are really, really important. And I say that as a person that absolutely hates editing. I don't know what it is. I've never kind of written anything of this length before, but editing my book has been basically torture, punctuated with very brief moments of inspiration. So I still know the importance of editing. And it doesn't have to be anything particularly scary, especially if you've written something quite short like a poem. It really just means going over what you've written with a fine-tooth comb and seeing if all of the words that you've used are the finished article, if there's anything you could change in order for it to be even more poignant or even more special or even more valuable. It might even be looking for typos, looking for grammatical, errors, or places you've just missed a word or, spelled something wrong, whatever. And then I suppose it's up to you whether you want to share it with other people, whether that's just, a friend or a family member, or whether that's putting it online or submitting it to a competition, or joining a writing group. All of those things are kind of valid, or you don't have to. It's completely up to you. But I think the most important thing I would do as soon as you've been writing for a little bit is to decide whether it's working for you. It might not. It might not be doing anything. It might just be bringing up memories at a time when you don't want to bring them up. Or you might find it just really boring. Some people absolutely hate writing, and that's totally fine. So taking a step back and thinking, what am I getting from this? Am I enjoying this? And sharing your work with the world can be really, really scary when you do it, but then you might get really great feedback, or you might get people that reach out to you and say, hey, I read your thing and I really benefit from that. That was great, thank you. And it suddenly feels really worth it. So definitely look inwards as well as outwards and see what writing things down has done for you. You could always go back to the prompts. You could always go back to the forms and say, okay, I didn't really like poetry, but I might like flash fiction, which is really small stories, kind of short stories that are almost less than 500 words. Or you might want to try something you've never done before, just to see what it's like. Kind of experimenting is really important, and it's totally up to you to make your own like writing journey and decide how often you want to do it, what you want to do it about. So we're coming to kind of the end of this workshop. It feels like it's gone super quickly, and I hope I haven't skimmed over too much. But I wanted to let you know of a few resources that are out there that can keep you going kind of beyond this workshop. And if you do realise that writing is helpful, it's something that you might want to try a bit more of, then here are some things that you can look at. There's so much out there, and because I decided to write my dad's memoir, I can't tell you how many memoirs I've read. I could probably do an entire blog post, and I will if people want me to, about my 10, best memoirs about loss. But reading any kind of book or any kind of poem, piece of writing, blog post that deals with grief, and even ones that don't, is the single best way to improve your writing. It's really annoying when people say that to you, because it's such a big ask to go out and really research the things that you want to write about, but I can guarantee it will make your writing better. Not because you steal ideas from other people, but just because you gain an understanding of what's out there, what you really like to write and read about, and what you don't. Pinterest, as well as just being the best place to spend your time, have loads of really good writing prompts. So you could try searching for things like grief journal, grief writing, writing prompts. Make yourself a board if you want and have a look at them. Obviously, Let's Talk About Loss, they've got a book group, they've got blog posts, which are really, really useful. YouTube is a great resource for both like ambient sounds, so we were talking about forest noises or beach noises or things, but also for examples of really good spoken word poetry, performance poetry, people reading out their stories, their poems. And Twitter as well. There's some hashtags like Losslit, that's tiny kind of tweet-sized poems and little musings about loss and grief. Often people will use the hashtag like writing prompts. They'll post writing prompts every day. And there's grief in 6 words as well, which is obviously quite self-explanatory. There's loads of writing resources out there that are just more general for people that write, and you could take those and then use them and put a kind of grief spin on them. So the Literary Consultancy is one that has a great inspiration section that they've just made for the kind of during the coronavirus pandemic. And it's filling up with stuff, so that's a great place to go. So just searching like the Literary Consultancy on Google, you'll get there. And if you're interested in sending stuff to competitions, you can purchase what's called the Writers and Artists Yearbook, which kind of details all of the competitions and things that are happening that year. But to be fair, it's quite a chunky book and it costs like £20. You could definitely have a look online. I'm sure there's some really good lists out there. And Mislexia, slightly biased because they're based in Newcastle, but they're a fantastic magazine for women writers of all ages. They often have loads and loads of competitions and things on the back pages. You can get Mislexia in WH Smith, in newsagents and whatever. And that's it. I hope that this has given you a brief overview of how to start writing about grief. It was really kind of aimed at people that have maybe never considered doing it before. But whatever stage you're at, I hope that you found some of it useful. You don't have to have ever thought about creative writing in your life. You really don't. But this could end up being something that you find really useful, not just to order all of the thoughts in your head, but maybe to explain how you're feeling to others. And if you do want to share things with a wider audience, it could really resonate with people literally all over the world. That's like the incredible power of social media, particularly in the kind of circumstances that we're living through at the moment. I think the most important thing in all of this is to give yourself permission to go and get writing. So whilst we're all kind of having this enforced, time in the house, find yourself a cozy corner, sit down, have some time, take some thoughts, and just see how it feels, see if it benefits you. And if it does, and you produce really great stuff, then I'd absolutely love to see it. And maybe we should start a kind of let's talk about loss like writers group. If you'd be interested in something like that, then definitely let me know. So I hope this was really, really useful. Please stay safe. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to reading what you've all produced. Thank you. Bye.